I want all of my left-leaning viewers and friends to take heed. This is a warning message. If you're a neoliberal, social democrat, left-leaning centrist, or maybe just an old-school blue dog Democrat, be advised, Antifa is not on your side. In this worrisome political climate where radicalism seems to be a growing trend, I'm seeing a disturbing rise in left-wing voices that are coming out in defense of Antifa. Some may claim that they are in defense of Black Lives Matter and are willfully ignorant about how Antifa is using the Black Lives Matter movement to further their own agenda. My own state's governor, Jay Inslee, was caught dumbfounded by a question in regards to the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. He reacted as if it was the first time hearing about the radical communists taking over a 7-city block area in his state's largest city and declaring themselves independent of the United States. If there is an open rebellion happening in your neighborhood and is being patrolled by armed militia, I think as a leader of said neighborhood you should at least be aware of the problem, if you haven't yet formulated a solution. But for the record, this is nothing new for Inslee. In 2019, when Antifa was engaging in widespread street brawls across the Northwest with right-wing groups such as Patriot Prayer and the Proud Boys, Inslee said, and I quote, "Tell me about Antifa. Tell me who Antifa is so I can tell you if that is a person that should be condemned or not." He thought Antifa was a person. He went on to quote, "Oh, you're talking about a movement. I was thinking that you were talking about an individual." And for the record, Jay Inslee is not an outlier in mainstream Democrats ignoring the problem growing in their cities, districts, and states. When specifically asked to denounce Antifa, several major Democratic figures all failed to do so. Kirsten Gillibrand, like Inslee, also claimed she didn't know what Antifa was. Bernie Sanders, Cory Booker, and Kamala Harris all failed to give a comment when asked. Marianne Williamson explicitly said she would not condemn them. And the most credit I will give is to Joe Biden and Andrew Yang, neither of which specifically condemned Antifa, but both condemned all violence and hatred in general. That is a very long list of the top leaders in the party's shocking complicit support for a radical group growing within. My more positive nature tells me that they're all just ignorant of what they're talking about, but my more realistic sense tells me they know full and well what they're doing. And here's why I decided to make this video. While listening to a podcast involving popular left-wing commentator David Pakman, he explicitly stated that although he doesn't like socialism or communism, after all he considers himself a social democrat, a la Scandinavia, he did give support for Antifa in the sense that they are helping move the Overton window further left so that the mainstream conversation can help push more left-wing policy initiatives that he supports, such as universal health care or free college tuition. I suppose that's not a bad argument when critiqued on the surface, but it fully demonstrates the left's ignorance of their own history and ideology. Social democracy is not compatible with Antifa's worldview. Antifa does not want to be like Scandinavia because they have a misconception of what Scandinavia is. They've been tricked by politicians such as Bernie Sanders and AOC that Scandinavia is the shining beacon as to the successes of democratic socialism. Only problem is, countries like Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and Finland are not socialist countries. They are market economies, in many ways way more capitalistic than the USA even, and have much stricter immigration standards. So if all these social democratic policies of Scandinavia were enacted here in the US, it would do nothing to please Antifa. They would only grow more radical and more violent. But first, I feel a history lesson is in order to teach you all what Antifa truly is and what they represent. Many who are familiar with the movement think it's something relatively new. The fact is, ideas of anarchism and communism are nothing new or progressive. The first organization known as Antifa was established in 1932 by the Communist Party of Germany. Antifaschistische Aktion. I probably butchered the pronunciation, but in essence, it was a rebellion against Hitler's Germany. Perhaps a noble endeavor for its time, although a German organization funded and founded by a German political party, Antifa was primarily a puppet for Joseph Stalin and the Soviet Union to influence Germany. Ernst Thälmann, head of the KPD, the Communist Party of Deutschland, took all of his orders and instructions from Stalin. And here is where it becomes really important, and I wish Pachmann could hear this. The chief enemy of Antifa in 1930s Germany was not the Nazis, but it was the Social Democratic Party of Germany, a center-left leaning party. The chief enemy of these radical communists who call themselves anti-fascist were not as opposed to open fascists like the Nazis, but were in fact more opposed to liberals who Stalin called social fascists. You see, you can never take these movements for their names alone. After all, who is going to disagree with Black Lives Matter or anti-fascism? I think Black Lives Matter. I hate fascism. Therefore, these movements are probably on my side. Wrong. They're clever monikers, but all it takes is a microscopic level of observation to see what these movements truly believe. That liberal democracies are evil, and that capitalism inevitably leads to fascism. Take Thälmann's quote about the SPD, for example. Some Nazi trees must not be allowed to overshadow the forest of social democrats. Both Thälmann and Stalin saw Hitler and the Nazis as a nuisance, but not their real enemy. The Nazis were a less sophisticated fascist movement than the SPD. And if you don't think that any of this is relevant to today, I ask you, why is it that Richard Spencer, an openly white supremacist neo-Nazi, is allowed on Twitter, but popular libertarian commentators such as Milo Yiannopoulos and Carl Benjamin, aka Sargon of Akkad, have both been banned? The answer is that communists aren't concerned with people like Spencer. Any rational person can easily disavow or diminish the arguments made by a racist like him, but allowing liberals to talk, to preach messages such as individual liberty, freedom of speech, and allowing reason and to debate to enact policies rather than through force and coercion, they are truly what stands in the way of their communist dreams. The parallels between 1930s Antifa and today's Antifa are almost too spooky to be a coincidence. They are motivated by the same ideology and think in the same patterns. And my great fear is that as liberal voices get squashed, you'll push more people to the radical right wing. Too many young, white youth who may be center-right leaning think, well, if you're going to play the identity politics game rather than discuss morals, values, and competing philosophies, then okay. But I'm not just going to lie down and die. I'm going to play the identity politics game too. And I intend to win. If Democrats do not take this warning seriously, they are going to create more racists, more fascists, more dangerous people than they ever would have had they just had a discussion and debate with people who believe in discussion and debate. How do you know when you're in a cult? You're not allowed to learn anything else. You want to banish liberals from the public forum because you believe capitalism always leads to fascism. Fine. But you're a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're going to create fascism because you aren't open to learning anything from someone else, because you're in a cult. And that is my message to my Democratic friends and listeners. Please, disavow Antifa. They are not on your side.